Hi, I'm Charlie Martinez, and you're watching Management Considerations for Cattle Producers in a Volatile Environment. At the time of this recording, COVID-19 has taken its toll on the southeast region of the United States, as well across the country and around the world. And so during this time, other economists and extension economists decided we should band together and try to create content for our producers to use during this time and also in the future in light of the COVID-19. As I said, I'm Dr. Charlie Martinez. I'm an extension professor at the University of Tennessee, specializing in farm management and financial management. And my partner on this video is Dr. Kenny Burdine at the University of Kentucky. And so, Kenny, if you would just kind of let everybody know who you are and what you do at Kentucky, and then we'll get this thing rolling.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. It's good to be here and good to talk about a very tough and frustrating topic, actually, and share some things. I've been in the UK about 20 years, cover a wide range of things. I deal primarily with cattle markets, but I cover all livestock markets and do some related stuff as well. So good to be with you and talk about it some. So it's a frustrating time, Charlie, lots of uncertainty, lots of apprehension by producers. What are you telling folks in Tennessee, things they can think about on the management side to kind of work their way through this?
Well, whenever we start thinking about production side and kind of things to think about for this thing, we'll go ahead and just kind of think about the livestock side. We can get into feeder side and the feeder cattle side, and I'm gonna hand that off to Kenny as that's kind of his specialty between the two of us. But some management techniques that I've kind of thought about and strategies is the history has shown that bull calves have been discounted greatly against steers. And so this might actually be a great year to get out there and round up the bull calves, cut them, and then try to find more profit. Because of that, you can try to find more profit in the spring, especially in the fall. I mean, at this point, we're kind of all sitting at home. Probably got some extra time on our hands. The kids might be home a little bit extra right now, and this would be a great time not only for a family bonding experience, but also to go out there and try to help your bottom line a little bit. And something that kind of talking to other folks and me personally in my own experience, right now we're kind of digging deeper on the cold cow side and thinking about culling harder. Personally, we have, the market's been pretty stable recently. And then if you're in a drought, especially if you're further south in the southern tip of Texas and you start getting central and southern tip of Texas, I know drought's really hitting them hard over there, but the prices are still staying steady. So I'm telling people here in Tennessee, but also around the southeast region, this might actually be the time to actually capitalize and get some good salvage value on the cold cow side. So I guess, Kenny, I'll hand it over to you and you can kind of help explain the pricing on those cold cows.
So we're seeing the same thing you're talking about here in Kentucky. One caveat that I'll say is that cold cow markets, probably more so than feeder markets, tend to be pretty regional. And they had held their ground very well. What I'm showing you right now is more of a monthly, longer term type price chart. So you can kind of see January, February, and March in blue for 2020. Also note kind of that longer run 9-year price data there. That's the dotted line, the dotted black line. If you pull up though and look at the actual weekly data, sorry, it's been pretty volatile. Now, this data actually goes through last week. So tomorrow we'll get new market data that I can talk about. But as you mentioned, the cold cow markets have held better than most any other market. Now they pulled back some this week, to be honest with you. Some plant closures, some uncertainty on that front. They have pulled back some, but they have been a bright spot for us. And I think a lot of it goes back to that. What's driving this market right now is really a demand shock, right? We're trying to price in the demand side. And in reality, a lot of your cheaper meats or cheaper meat products, ground beef being one, become more attractive in markets like this. So it kind of makes sense that cold cow markets have held better than some of the others have. So this, I think, is definitely an opportunity for some cash flow for a lot of calf producers that need to be thinking about that. If you shift gears and think about, okay, what would this mean in terms of heifer development? So the next question that I get sometimes from producers is, well, I'm going to cull cows a little bit deeper this year, but I want to keep my cow herd the same. Or, is this a good time, as cheap as calves are, to think about developing some heifers? Right. So kind of walk through that really quickly. Most all the price data that we're going to use is going to be as current as we can get it. But also I think it's important to remember that, we're recording this on April 2nd, 2020. And mention that because if you're watching this a few weeks from now, there's no question things are going to change somewhat. So what I'm showing you right now is just kind of my estimate of what it would cost to develop a heifer. I'm thinking roughly, something I'm going to wean here pretty quickly, and then take her about 12 months from now. At that point, she's bred the calf the following fall. So I'm thinking roughly weaning plus 12 months. Now, last week here in the Southeast, a 550-pound heifer would have sold for about $1.30 ballpark.
Okay.
She's worth about $715. And that's always cost number one when you think about heifer development, right? So even if I don't buy these heifers, even if I own them, right?
So you got to charge yourself.
Yeah, but by not selling that heifer calf, I've essentially got that cost in there. That's cost number one. I've got pasture maintenance and pasture rent in there. I've got $75 for the two. I'm assuming I'm going to stock at about 3/4 of an acre per head. I've got feed through that following winter, so I understand that I'm really talking about the winter that's going to be coming up here in 6 to 8 months. So not right away, but down the road. She's a little bit bigger at that point. I've got mineral in there. I've got vet medicine at $35. I've got breeding cost at $50. Got death loss at 2%. You'll notice in this scenario, I've got both haul and I've got commission zeroed out. So I'm kind of making the assumption that I'm developing these heifers to keep myself. I'm not developing them to actually sell to somebody else, but that's something that if you were going to do that. I've got $15 in there for other costs that I may not have thought about that might apply to you. I've got interest in there at 5%, depreciation at $30. And then the last thing I want to talk about is the very last line there. And this is hard to quantify, but anytime you're developing heifers, you want to think about what about the heifers that I intend to develop but I don't keep, right?
Right.
If I ask a group of producers, I'm going to replace 10 cows in my herd, how many heifers do I hold back to do that, right? I'm going to hold back more than 10. So there's a cost to holding back heifers that I end up not keeping and entering the cow herd. So oftentimes those get sold as heavy feeders, right? But and I actually probably going to lose a bit of money on those. So simple example, if I lose $100 and I end up not keeping 20% of my heifers, when I think about what that means for the ones that I do keep. So simple example, if I lose $100 a head on 20%, meaning if I hold back 5 heifers, only actually keep 4 of them, I've got to take that $100 loss and spread it across the other 4. So that's where the $25 comes from. So all in all, what I want to kind of leave you with here is that when you think about what we're probably looking at, my best guess is somewhere in kind of this 12 to 1250 range is what I would have invested in a heifer that I might develop in the next 12 months to enter my cow herd next year.
Okay.
In terms of wrapping this discussion up, I hand it back to you, Charlie. A few things I would say. Generally speaking, heifer development is a fairly profitable enterprise, meaning that people who develop heifers as kind of their key line business, meaning that's what they do. They buy young heifer calves, they develop them, they sell bred heifers. They tend to do well with that year in, year out. One of the things to remember when you think about a heifer development enterprise versus a stocker enterprise is it's a much longer time frame, right?
Right.
You should make more per head when you develop heifers because that's a 12-month time period, not a 6 or 8 month time period. So you do need a better return than you would on, say, a stocker enterprise. It's always tough to estimate prices ahead of time, right? And it's even more important when you're thinking about heifer development. We're talking about roughly a 12-month time period. So right now we're trying to estimate, what is that bred heifer worth 12 months from now? And I can't hardly tell you what that calf is worth right now. It's moving so quickly. So there's always some uncertainty there. But last thing I would make, or last point I would make about it, is that so often bred heifer prices and any breeding stock values are really driven by what the current calf market is, when in reality their profitability is determined over their entire lifetime, right? So hopefully that bred heifer, produces us calves for 6, 8, 10, 12 years, right?
Right.
It's really that time period that determines her value, not the current year. So in the same way that breeding stock can become too valuable when calf prices are really high, the opposite's also true, right? Sometimes breeding stock becomes really cheaper than it should when the calf market's down because
Not
it's
fun when it happens.
So anyway, so other thoughts from your end, Charlie?
Well, kind of moving on, getting back to kind of what I highlighted earlier in terms of steer versus bulls. For people that are watching this, Kenny went ahead and pulled up the Kentucky auctions. Using those prices, especially here for Tennessee, we wouldn't see much of a difference anyway. So I went ahead and cheated and going to use your numbers there, Kenny, since you had them ready to roll. But you're still going to see roughly the same type of discount. And there I see on the red line, you have your bulls, and then on the black line, you have steers. And you have a seasonal spike in there in the first quarter to going into the second quarter. But you're still going to have a discount, a consistent discount throughout the year. And Kenny has if you're a Kentucky producer, Kenny went ahead and also made you a monthly chart there that kind of shows the discount. And as you can see, no matter what the year was, you're always going to have that seasonal discount increase in terms of the end of that first quarter going into your second quarter. And then for our Tennessee folks, I went ahead and pulled some data, and I went ahead and went from 2010 all the way to 2014 and broke it down by the 50 weight increments. And you can see as we get bigger, just like Kentucky, we're going to have an increase in terms of the discount per weight class. And then as you look at it in terms of 2015 to current, not only has the trend still stayed the same, but we actually increased across the board on all weight classes in terms of the discount that we're taking. And so whether you're in Kentucky, whether you're in Tennessee, or other kind of feeder states here on the East Coast or on the east side of the Mississippi, this is something you probably should think about in terms of production and thinking, okay, how can I, in times of uncertainty, where can I find an extra dollar? Where can I find an extra couple of cents there? I think castrate is relatively cheap compared to these discounts. And if you average it out across a whole, on a per head basis, if we got 5 weights and we're going to get rid of them right now, I think it's completely worth it to go ahead and say, let's cut them and get rid of them. And if you're in the fall, if you're a spring calving herd and you're gonna sell in the fall, I think as the same strategy can hold true for you this year, especially this year in terms of so much uncertainty. I still think that discount's going to be there versus bulls versus steers. So if you know it's still going to be there, even though we're in an uncertain time, why not try to capitalize and try to capture some kind of profit there, whether you're selling 4 weights or 8 weights. And so if we think about it in terms of the 550-pound steer outselling the 550-pound bulls by $11.23 per hundredweight over the last 9 years, that's $61, roughly $62 per head. So if you want to think about it in terms of, this is Kentucky number, but that's still also going to be the same as I just showed you in the Tennessee chart. That's quite a bit of money. I think maybe even if someone wanted to charge you $20 to castrate them, you're still going to come out $40 a head, or not $42 a head. And so kind of thinking about it, you can think about, well, how many additional pounds would be needed to offset this price discount? And so if we said, all right, we're at $1 per pound, around 62 pounds, that's kind of what you're thinking, or 80 cents per pound, around 78 pounds. And so, another way you can think about it and capitalize on it is implants provide an option as well. Kenny, what other things can people do at this time right now? You got implants you can cut. Is there any kind of other things we can grab extra value on?
Yeah, it's a really good question. One of the things I like to tell producers is that, good management typically pays in good markets and bad markets.
Yeah.
And, thinking about that, the other thing I think that comes up sometimes is when we're in a situation where the markets are down like they have been, good producers start thinking about what are some things that I can do? What are some things that I can do to add some value? Or, are there opportunities for me to grab some calves at a lower price right now and make some money? So we think a little bit about what would a stocker enterprise look like right now? Would it make sense, given where the calf market is, for me to grab some calves, put them on a grazing program, move them sometime this fall? So I'll show you a couple of charts here first quickly. So again, I showed you the cull cow chart earlier. Here's the same thing for my 5-weight calves. Now, I want you to focus first on the black line. Typically our calf market moves up, from January to about April. Now, we're not seeing that this year for a hodgepodge of reasons, right? But you can see what happened between February and March. Now, if we go to that next slide, I'm going to show you that weekly data again. And this is what's tricky. So focus right now on that 5-weight price chart. So that's the black line. Major drop, 15, 20 bucks a hundredweight from about the 1st of March to week before last. But last week, things jumped a great deal. Now, I don't think we'll hold that this week, but I did want to show this just to make the point that, it's hard to get a feel for what these calves are worth right now. But it also makes another point too, that you're going to see a lot of volatility, which means there's going to be times you can get some really good buys on calves if you catch them at the right time. So being
Right.
optimistic about that and thinking about getting those calves placed now in the summer stocker program probably makes some sense. So we can talk about what some assumptions might be on the stocker enterprise. So if I had the fall board in the mid 120s, and I updated this morning. Now, full transparency, it's April 2nd. The feeder cattle futures were limit down yesterday, right? So it makes it hard to do something like this. But board right now for fall feeder cattle futures at around 124 to 126. Now that should put an 8 weight somewhere in that 118 to 124 range, something like that. That's what I'm going to work off of. If I assume a pound and a half a day of gain throughout the summer, and I always like to kind of clarify that. So they're going to do a lot better than that, in April and May, right? We got plenty of grass.
Yeah.
They're going to slow down in the summer too. So this might mean they're doing 2 pounds a day in the spring, a pound a day in the summer, then back to a pound and a half in the fall. But I'd like to think they average about a pound and a half, and that's going to vary, obviously. I'm going to use the same number I used from the heifer development stuff. I'm going to talk about a $35 an acre pasture maintenance charge. Think about fertilizer, think about pasture clipping, think about seeding. And then I've got a $40 pasture rent in there. So I'm going to try and capture pasture cost. Again, I'm going to assume roughly 3/4 of an acre per head. Quarter pound a day of mineral at $20 a bag, and 2% death loss and 5% interest. And what that actually looks like in terms of budget.
There you go.
Thanks. If I look at that 850 pound steer to $1.22, okay, come fall, and that's a prediction, right? That's a little lower than he might be worth right now, but I think that's a pretty defendable number, honestly, somewhere in that $1.20, $1.25 range. He's worth a little over $1,000. I'm going to value that 5 weight steer at $1.50. That's a little bit above last week's state average. If you look at what groups are selling for, I'm going to probably be paying more, $1.55, $1.60. So somewhere in that range makes sense. That number is going to vary, obviously, but that's going to be pretty key in terms of what it actually means. I'm going to ignore pasture cost and pasture rent for right now and think in terms of a return to land, labor, and management, what a lot of folks like to do. Got my mineral cost in there. I'm going to figure $25 for vet and medicine. I'm going to figure $30 for commission. That's going to vary based on how many you sell at one time. I've got $10 in there to transport him to the stockyards. I've got $10 for other costs. I do have interest in there at 5%. That's probably going to be a little bit lower than what you paid last year, but somewhere in kind of that 4.5 to 5.5, probably going to make sense this year. And I've got death loss at 2%. So just focus on the bottom line for a second. If my costs are reasonably close, and if I want to think about a return to land capital management, and I like that $1.22 sale price in the fall, and I can get that 5 weight steer calf bought for about $1.50, I'm showing a return in the $75 to $80 range per head. And that's fairly typical for a stocker operation. And I guess the point that I would make there is that although the markets are volatile, this almost implies that our calf market is about where it should be given what our fall feeder market is. And that's an important thing to understand, that if I'm a stocker operator and I like what I can get these calves bought for right now, this is not that much different than any other spring, in that there may be some opportunity to stock some calves through summer. I always like to talk too about some of the sensitivities, and this is pretty key, right? We can talk about a budget like I showed you, but what really matters is what if things change. So first thing, with that $76 return that I'm estimating, I always like to point out that if I'm selling an 8 weight steer, if that price drops by 9 cents a pound, right? If that sale price goes from 122 to 113, that's a break even. That's how sensitive my return is to that sale price. Be optimistic on the buy as well. A nickel change in that calf price is worth $27.50. So if I can get that same steer calf bought for $1.45 instead of $1.50, then I've added $27.50 to that bottom line. A percent change in death loss is worth $8 or $9 a head. I've got a lot of questions about interest rates, and they're certainly important, but a 1% change in interest rates is worth about $3 to $5 on the bottom line, depending on what I'm actually spending on calves and so forth. Wrapping this discussion up, leave you with a couple things. So first of all, good margin operators, and this applies to stocker operators, backgrounders, people that are buying calves and adding value in some way, they tend to be opportunistic. They don't lock in on a certain weight of calves, certain type of calves. They might buy steers, might buy heifers. Charlie, they might buy some of those bulls you talked about that are a good value, cut them and background them, stock them as well, right? They're opportunistic.
Right.
They look for the best buys in the marketplace and they move when they see an opportunity. And when you've got volatile markets like we've got right now, by nature, that means prices are going to be up and down a lot, which means sometimes you can catch some really good buys on some of those types of cattle out there to put in these programs. Have to mention this as an economist. I spend a lot of time talking about risk management, but this is the perfect example of why risk management matters. And
Yes.
Although I may be looking at what I think is a decent return to a stock or enterprise, if we've learned anything the last month, it's how much price risk is out there. So thinking about things that we can do to protect our sale price and cover our downside is, I think, always worth consideration in any market, especially in one like this one.
Yes, I completely agree. So I guess, I echo that. This is what this is not on here, but this is completely that last sentence. This is why we risk manage. I think this has been a perfect example. And then last fall, whenever we had the fire and, the markets kind of went volatile on us also, that's the kind of two black swan events that have occurred. And, we can't control that from, the stalker side, but if you could protect yourself, this would have been the perfect past, 8 months to have perfect protection. But I think, throughout this video, I think these 3 bullet points have kind of bring together everything that we've kind of talked about. Dig deeper on culling. This is a perfect time to get some salvage value at the time of this recording, like you said. In a couple of weeks, the cull cow market probably could tank. Who knows at this point? Just going to depend upon how long this pandemic's going to last. But right now, if there's any reason, bad udder, open, having calving issues, any kind of reason that you want to go ahead and cull that female too old, borderline age-wise, this is a great time to go ahead and try to get some salvage value on her. My biggest thing is if you cut the bulls, you're going to find profit, and kind of how you've hit it. Good management is going to find good money no matter what the market is. People are going to recognize, buyers will recognize at the sale barn, if that's your main source of marketing, they're going to realize that there's a good, healthy steer out there, and they're going to give, it might not be the highest price, but it's going to be a fair price and something very above whatever the bulls are going to be bringing. And then, it is a doom and gloom type of scenario here with the COVID-19 pandemic. But if you're someone that's kind of aggressive and has probably some cash on hand, it might be a good time to be thinking about the opportunities that the market's presenting. You did a great job talking about the stalker programs, the heifer development. If you have the cash on hand, I think this is actually one of the best times to actually capitalize on the prices. Same way people are cashing on the stock market. This is a great time if you have cash on hand to cash in on the cattle market. But I appreciate we appreciate everybody paying attention, and if you got this far, we really appreciate you. And so there's our contact information. If you would like if you have any more questions or comments, you can email us there, call us at our office phones. But if you're on Twitter, you can see our Twitter handles there. Kenny, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, just thank you for hosting, and good to do this with you. And I'd love to hear from folks. So reach out to us.
Awesome. Well, thank you, and thank you for watching.